Alex Cruikshank. I'm the owner of Bastion Books in Bastion Square in Victoria. We are the official bookseller for the event. So for anybody who wants to order books afterwards, in the chat box to the right of your screen are our details. You can email me direct if you don't want to order online. My email is alex@bastionbooks.ca. You can call the store at 250-385-8786, or you can go on our website and the link is there. And I will pass over to Claire Kelly from New West Press to introduce the event. Thanks all for coming.
Welcome again, and thanks to you all, and to the readers, and to Alex Bastion Books. I'm Claire Kelly from New West Press. I'm the marketing and production coordinator. I wear a lot of hats. Only one a baseball cap, which is in the mail. I was just talking about how I'm obsessed with baseball. It might come up a few times. We're here on Zoom tonight to celebrate two New West authors and their latest books, Kevin Holowack's Light on a Part of the Field, and Karen Hofmann's A Brief View from the Coastal Suite, with special guest reader Tracy Scouse, author of Hunger Moon. All three authors will be reading from their books, and we'll be having a Q&A after. There is a chat box. If you scroll around on your screen, you should be able to find it, and that's where you'll be placing your questions. As I said, we are recording this event. Feel free to leave your cameras on if you're comfortable with that, so the readers can see your presumably lovely faces. I don't like to make presumptions, but I will make a presumption about that. We're coming to you from Alberta and BC. We acknowledge that the lands we are gathering on are the traditional gathering places for many Indigenous peoples. We honor, respect, and celebrate the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call these territories home. I don't like to just have the land acknowledgement and just walk away from it, because that happens too much metaphorically and literally. So here's something you can do if you can do it. Because all the books have a BC connection, I will be putting a link in the chat box as soon as I'm done rambling to the British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability Society. BCANDS is probably the easier way to remember that. The money donated to them helps support programs and services to address the health needs of Indigenous communities and individuals within BC. It's good to have something to do and something to reflect upon while living on the land of others. Up first tonight is Tracy Scouse. Tracy graduated from the Pacific University Low Residency MFA program in 2015. Her short stories and nonfiction have appeared in several publications across North America, including Grain. This probably needs to be updated, but we'll do the other ones. Grain, New Ohio Review, The New Quarterly, and Prairie Fire, and have been nominated for 4 Pushcart Prizes, might need to be updated again, I'm not sure, and 2 Journey Prizes. For the past 20 years, Tracy has lived in Cumberland, BC, with her husband and 2 sons. Just this week, I think 2 days ago, Hunger Moon, Tracy's debut collection, was announced as a finalist in the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize in the literary fiction category. And I'm wearing my Moon shirt to celebrate. I just want that sartorially acknowledged. Welcome, Tracy.
Did notice your shirt when we were talking earlier, and I appreciate you wearing it in celebration. Thank you. Can you hear me?
You're a bit quiet for some reason. I'm not sure why. It might just be me though.
No, sometimes it does that. Hold on. Is that better? Yeah, it's okay. Okay.
Still quiet.
Okay, I'll get closer to my mic. Sometimes my computer does this, it goes in and then out. I don't know what to do. I apologize.
That sounds better.
Okay, good. I like literally just moved my computer. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, okay, I'm Tracy. Thank you for coming. And I wanted to congratulate both Karen and Kevin for their launch of their novels, and yeah, the pandemic launch thing. It's at least we're a year into it, and we've got some experience with it. Hunger Moon came out last April, and most of the characters in these stories are seekers of some kind. They are looking for answers in a secular world, and so I sort of played with like different the different kind of answers that are available for those of us who are looking for them, and what we kind of gravitate toward, which don't always necessarily work out very well for us. So this one's called Bliss and a Boy I Once Loved, and in this the main character, well, you'll get a sense of it, but she really takes these adages a little bit too literally. Before I met JP, nothing remarkable had happened in my life, but I felt an impatience that something should, and soon. I was 20, worked at a health food store, and agonized over the phrases my boss had plastered above the bulk bins. Live your potential and follow your bliss. I asked him what they meant, how exactly one did those things, but he only cast me his one with the universe look and said, "It's your journey, Claudia. You'll find your path." So while I was elbows deep in red lentils or culling limp charred leaves from the produce bin, I wondered how I'd do it. Live my potential, follow my bliss. I'd already given up on university, dropped out and quit, my academic mother told her friends, though I'd completed 2 whole years. But I'd skipped classes, daydreamed in the library or student union building about doing something mildly heroic instead, climbing Everest, say, or spooning pablum into the mouths of orphaned third world babies. Lately, I fantasized that a film producer might walk through the door on a hunt for carob chips, soy milk, and a woman with my exact coloring and bone structure. A film producer never walked through the door, not on my shift anyway. Only JP with his spectacular bowed legs and what I mistook for an oversized guitar case. "No money in the hat today," he said. He wore no hat, his dark hair in a low ponytail, loose strands fallen around his face. "I need change for the bus." He set his instrument case down, and though I stood right there, he tapped the service bell twice and positioned his ear to catch its resonant ping. Then he smiled, a lopsided smile I immediately fell for, but his eyes and the eyelashes that surrounded them were so intense, like 2 black stars, I had to look away. That's when I noticed his index finger, cocooned and swaddled in gauze. "What happened?" I asked, and he rotated the finger to show all sides. "This? Just a tossle with Daisy's dinner." "Dinner?" I said. "What kind of dinner?" He picked up one of my paper cranes. I'd been folding them all afternoon, a promotional idea for a protein powder sale, and now a whole origami flock roosted on the counter. He looked as if he might speak to the bird, blow on its wings and send it soaring, but he only said, "Cool," and put it on top of the leave a penny jar. Then he pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket, ironed it flat, and handed it over. Against store policy, I broke it into quarters and dimes, which he dropped into a leather pouch that hung around his neck. He winked, thanked me, and grabbed his case to go. I didn't want him to leave, so I offered him a handful of nuts. "I hate the Brazils." He scrunched his nose. I agreed, but no one but my mother ever ate the Brazils. And to show my allegiance, I picked out 4 total, then filled his palm with almonds, hazelnuts, and cashews. He closed a fist around them and dispensed one at a time into his mouth. Between chewing and swallowing, I decided to say something, to introduce myself, invite him for tea, coffee, whatever he liked. But the bells above the door tinkled and a man, huffy and red-faced, walked in and asked if we carried certain herbal laxatives. The next week, July now, I saw him again. Every day I lunched on a small swath of lawn outside the university sports complex. Hummus and crackers, overly sprouted sandwiches, concoctions involving TVP and ancient grains. On that day, a Tuesday, I think, it was muggy and hot, and I was flipping through Diet for a Small Planet. My boss had lent it to me and told me if I wanted to make a difference in this troubled world, and I did, didn't I? Then I should start by reading it. After my sandwich and a chapter on rules for food combining, I cracked open a cup of soy-based pudding. It came from a giveaway pyramid stacked in the staff room. The first spoonful tasted more like chalk than chocolate, the second almost entirely calcite. I didn't venture for a third, but got up to toss the rest into a nearby garbage can. It reeked, garbage soured by summer heat, and I stepped quickly away, bumping into a runner drinking Powerade. "Watch it," he said. Too late, because I jolted his arm and an alarming red stripe splashed across his shirt. "I'm sorry," I said, and searched my purse for a napkin. "It's totally ruined," he snapped. I apologized again and wanted to offer him some laundry tips, but he said bitch like a harsh sneeze, something I was and wasn't supposed to hear. If I hadn't felt chastised, I might have headed back up Spadina toward the store, but flustered, I went west. For a whole block, maybe two, I scurried as if that man were tracking me, his bitch compounding with my every step. "You're hypersensitive," my mother always said. "You need to let things roll off your back." I passed a bistro, a bike repair, and dozens of summer students trying to do just that. Then, as I approached the yoga place, it did roll off. Not because I willed it to, but because I heard a startling, hypnotic sound. First, I assumed it was a chant drifting from the yoga studio. I'd sat in during an open house the summer before, had joined 4 other strangers on a carpet as a woman dressed in white explained that Om was the universal sound, the seed sound, whatever that meant. This sound, however, sounded more melodic, instrumental, and came from outside. A little farther along it grew, louder, and pretty soon I reached a young man cross-legged on the sidewalk, leaning against a locust tree. He cradled a sitar on his lap, strumming the opening of what I'd later learn was a classical Indian raga. It took me a minute to recognize him, his head bowed, but a leather pouch swung gently across his sternum and a gauzy finger traveled the complicated fret. He plucked the strings slowly, a low, twangy undertone to a sequence of higher notes, which sparkled and sounded like magic wands waving away city noise and unbearable heat. I perched on a nearby step, hoping he'd notice me, but he closed his eyes and increased the tempo. I'd never heard such music, nor watched anyone so intensely concentrated, so utterly uninhibited and alone in their action. He curled his wiry arms around his instrument and shook his head in conversation with the music. His fingers slowed, then sped up, and a couple of times he strummed so fast I thought his hand might fly right off. A small audience gathered. One woman planted herself in the shade of the tree. He took no notice of her, of any of us, though he was transporting us all. My own body loosened, swayed. My heart lifted and expanded across that map of sound. My lunch hour was over by the time he conjured a storm of notes that collided and crashed. Then he built them into a great spire, and when he reached the very peak, he stopped, held his strumming hand midair and let it all drop. I waited for more. Everyone did. Some finale, 1 or 2 notes to resolve the whole thing. But it was over, and the city resumed its ordinary hustle. Traffic, grit, white glaring sky. He caressed the gourd part of his instrument, his chest rising, falling, as if he'd run up 12 flights of stairs, and a single sweat bead rolled down his nose. None of the bystanders clapped, though everyone quietly excavated their pockets for change. I had nothing in my purse, only a few pennies and a subway token. So I ripped an end page out of my book, folded it into a crane, and placed it in his case amid a silver constellation.
I always love that story because it reminds me of a thing I've termed first boyfriend syndrome. Which I had a bad case of in grade 11. Great story. And just perfect little details. I have two quick questions, which I didn't discuss with you. Do you know how to make paper cranes?
No, but my son, one of my sons was really into origami. And so he had a lot of like origami paper, and he was the origami man.
I could see origami being the next pandemic thing. Like we did baking. Yeah. Now people are like gardening, and apparently there's no lumber to be found in the world because everyone's making porches. I also have one more question. Do you have a favorite nut?
Do I have a favorite nut?
Yeah.
I do love the cashews.
I'm a cashew fan too, but then I made a nut hierarchy. It goes cashew, walnut, peanut? No, yeah, peanut, I guess.
Yeah, I've never thought to make a hierarchy, but for sure, yeah, down with the soy pudding for sure.
Thank you for reading.
Thank you.
Remember, everyone, there's a chat box available for questions and nice comments. Our second reader and first launcher this evening is Kevin Holowack. Kevin is a writer from Edmonton who has his MA in English from the University of Alberta. We got to talking once, who's that academic who walked a lot?
Walter Benjamin.
Benjamin, because I wrote, I wrote about walking a lot. We had a mind melt. Kevin has lived in various places across Canada and Europe. His work has been published in Glass Buffalo and Lemon Hound. Kevin's debut novel, Light on a Part of the Field, is a Noonatak first fiction series book. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi. Can everybody hear me? It's okay? Wow. There's 50 people here. I've never spoken to 50 people before in my life. Also, I can't gauge anyone's reactions, so I went into this thinking I was going to be funny, but I don't think I'm going to be funny because I can't hear anybody laughing. So I'm going to read from a section that is about a quarter of the way through the novel. So I guess just some background. It's about a family of people with their own kind of artistic ambitions. So the novel deals a lot with just them navigating what it means to have a difficult family relationship and kind of what it means to live in modern times. The novel takes place mostly in the 70s. And in this section, one of the main characters, Ruth, she's a painter. She's living alone in a fairly isolated farm, and she befriends a farming couple, a sort of conservative Christian family who ask her to paint their portrait, and then they give her a Bible. So this is her reading from the Bible. Seeing the word wine in print gives her a taste for it. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. She doesn't pause to question what an erotic letter is doing in the Old Testament. Maybe King James had a mojo, she thinks. She returns to the book with a glass of cheap Sauvignon Blanc and fans through the pages like she's seen Gale do many times, now understanding why. Because a book like this has no starting point and no end. Reading it sequentially feels like a waste of time. She's too quickly buried in a sea of names and evocations, many of which she recognizes only from Christmas songs or art books. She prefers to treat the Bible like a polite picnic, to get a flavor for each book, but not to indulge. She picks Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon as her favorites, because they appear to have the least to do with religion. Ecclesiastes appears downright nihilistic. There's also something intriguing about Revelation, but she doesn't feel equipped to understand it. Maybe, she thinks, she can bring it up with Bill and Elizabeth, a conversation starter. At sunset, she lands on the Book of Ruth, which she always knew existed but has never read. Despite the story being rather boring compared to the Song of Solomon, she's amused to read about her nominal ancestor. The biblical Ruth lived in another universe. She was a simple, mundane, family-oriented woman devoted to her mother-in-law, even long after her husband died. And she worked in the fields with her hands. She was poor, virtuous, and never took more than was given. It's hard to get a feeling for the biblical Ruth, though, what she dreamt of or what she felt. The language of the King James Bible is too distant. Grammatically, it's rife with mistakes, and with its highfalutin, ever-condescending tone, it was surely written by a man who had no place describing the inner lives of women anyway. She wants to know what Ruth looked like, if she had good posture, if her face resembled her own at all. She goes to her husband's library and searches for a book of religious portraits. Under Art and Miscellaneous, she finds a tall book called Romanticism and Religion, which is full of 18th century oil paintings. She fans through the glossy pages until she finds what she's looking for. The biblical Ruth as imagined by some Italian painter named Francesco Hayez some 140 years ago. She is standing in the center of a vertical rectangular frame before a soft brown and yellow countryside. For some reason, her tunic has fallen from her shoulders, leaving her naked from the belly button up, even though her bottom half is wrapped in two separate robes. She wears a gold band around her right forearm and holds it out for examination. A bushel of wheat is tucked in her left elbow and her hair is wrapped. She gazes at something to the left of the viewer. Ruth is drawn to the shadows, the hue of them, the loam-colored shadows that encircle her eyes and dissolve as they approach the edge of her chin. No, she thinks, her posture is not very good. She is hunched a little to her right and her head is nowhere near straight on her shoulders. In fact, she looks a little more like Gail, with her bad knee and her eyes always on the distance. But the image is intriguing because it's ripe with mysteries. Why is she topless? Was that the norm amongst Moabite women? It's common enough amongst the religious subjects of 19th century men. Topless Bathsheba, topless Mary Magdalene, topless Delilah, topless Eve, topless Lot's wife, the whole gang. On the next page is the same painting, almost identical except that Ruth's tunic has climbed partway back up to her shoulders, covering her breasts at least. In the second version, the trees in the background are more distinct, but the face is less defined, as though these two elements cannot fully coexist. I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 16. A lot has happened in between, but it's not relevant. Ruth at this point is, she's continuing to befriend this farming couple, and their relationship goes a little bit further than friendship into something a little bit obsessive and maybe unsettling for them all. So she's still working on the portrait. What does the world need of us? Ruth asks the empty parlor, her husband's ghost. He can't answer, and she can't imagine how he would respond. Instead, Bill and Elizabeth stare at her from the canvas. Near the highlight on Bill's retina is a minuscule convex blur that could be her, the artist, l'artiste. That's what I would have been called if I was featured in one of those art books, she says to herself, alongside Matisse or Hayez. She's been there in his retina for months now, since Bill commissioned the painting. Now it's October. He must be wondering when it will get done, she thinks. In the back of her mind, she's already given up on producing the portrait he actually wanted, something simple to give his nieces to remember him by. No, the painting is more hers than his. It's her closest companion these days. Snow flies in the Shuswap. The yard, the dead sunflowers, the roof of the barn where the cows are also dying, and the overgrown vegetable garden are whitened. Ruth sees her first glimpse of winter, and her first reaction is self-condemnation. I'm too slow, she thinks. I'm wasting my time. Soon the winter will destroy everything. She has no patience to wait for the next season. Ami, that's Ruth's youngest daughter. Ami is already dressed for the snow in a cotton-filled coat and waterproof pants that whoosh when she walks. Are we going to watch TV today, Mum? Why aren't you outside waiting for the bus? Is it too cold? It's Saturday. Is it now? Sammy's mom's gonna pick me up and we're gonna buy a pumpkin. Ruth digs through her wallet and gives her daughter a few bills. Come back by dinner time. This year, like most years, winter came with a prelude. By noon, the snow has almost all melted, aside from the deposits under parked vehicles and in the shadows of buildings. Ruth packs her painting pad, brushes, and a selection of hand-mixed paints adapted from Winsor & Newton's nostalgic collection. But the colors she wanted, earthy, cadaver-esque, autumnal, muted as though behind a thin fog, weren't in the catalog. She drives to Bill and Elizabeth's farm. It's Sunday, they're at church, so she has time. Before she finds a subject, she practices 10 minutes of strolling around meditation, trespassing meditation. She walks the perimeter of the house, eyes skirting the parallel lines of the cedar shakes. Then she branches to the pasture and leans against the fence, examining the muscular, picturesque, black and white cows and the alpaca that shares their quarters. The alpaca stands in an opposite corner from the rest of the herd facing north. The outlier, the artist. Then she turns to view a distant acre of corn. To her, the crop is a line, but to a bird, perhaps, it would appear like a rhombus. There's a hill in the middle of the corn, an island with some coppered trees, and a border mown around the perimeter of it, separating the crop from the adjoining woods and allowing one to walk around the corn, even to hide within it. She decides to sketch the furrows in the grass that the tractor has left behind, which occasionally break the surface and reveal dirt. The lines undulate toward a distant shed. The waves in the field, they're a pleasing enough shape. By 10 o'clock, she feels she's pushing her luck, so she packs up and jogs to the car. She returns several times over the course of October. She goes every Sunday without fail, but also the odd day in between. On those days, she parks her car on the long driveway, behind the trees and hidden from the house, and banks on nobody leaving or entering the property for the next couple of hours. But in case they're home, she wears dark clothing and treks through the forest to avoid being spotted. From the tree line, she can still get decent enough angles on the house and the shed. It's difficult to move through the woods with her pencils, pad, and paint box in tow, and by the end of it, she's covered in grime and needles. Being forced to inhabit the woods, though, comes with the advantage of uncovering things such as abandoned wasp hives, bits of litter caught in the trees, or the more intrepid autumn flowers. Her greatest find is an abandoned treehouse in the woods east of the house. It's the haunting kind of beautiful, the beauty of things children once loved but no longer do. Many loose boards hang by a single nail. The planks are covered in at least two kinds of lichen, which alternate between whitish-green and yellow. The tire swing contains an abandoned nest, and a child had long ago carved their name into one of the support beams. Willie. She compiles dozens of pages of the house, the vehicles, the shed, the corn, the cows, the alpaca, and Willie's treehouse. This done, she attempts to draft a list of beauties in her head, a list of things that can add credence to what she's collected on the page, things she can point to and say when someone asks, "This is what artists are doing. They are finding beauties where no one else can, things the modern world no longer has a place for, or it never did." To stand in these forgotten parts and extract their beauties, it's like setting a bucket below a waterfall and using it to fill a bathtub. I have one more short section, a few pages later on. Ruth spends a few minutes with the portrait in progress. Bill and Elizabeth side by side on the steps of their porch. His face is done much better than hers, much better. The lines are more confident, the lips like dips on the edge of a riverbank, the hair feathered like the down of a duck. To represent him, she had to repurpose the things she understood from the natural world to fit the human face. Now she uses a fat filbert brush to feel the paint, to smudge, to blend the contours of the cheekbone and pull the shadow away from an invisible sun. Then she holds it side by side with Francesco Hayes' portrait of the biblical Ruth to compare. As she does, she notices another distinction between herself and the biblical Ruth. It has to do with labor, not the quantity, but the quality. Labor is distinct from work, she thinks, because the former carries an inherent hardship. Labor is livelihood. One labors not for fulfillment or pleasure, but for life. Ruth labored to make herself at home in an alien environment She labored until she met Boaz. Laboring in the sun is not the same as working in the sun, because one can work in the sun on a hobby garden. But laboring is what Bill does as a farmer. If he stops, he starves. But an artist, she thinks, if they are genuine, will also starve when the laboring stops. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I wanted to tell you something. When I was talking to the sales team about your book, it's one of the hats I wear, I joked that I think you must have done a magic spell to write the book, and that I want to know what that spell is so that I can write something like that. But my quick off-the-cuff question, did you ever find an abandoned treehouse? Or did you just imagine an abandoned treehouse?
No, I think I've seen one in Italy.
Great detail. I wish I knew Italian so I could say abandoned treehouse in Italian, but I
Me
don't.
too, yeah.
Thank you for reading.
Thank you.
I scroll up because I lost my spot. Our final reader tonight and second launcher is Karen Hofmann, who I have muted, so she'll have to unmute herself. Karen grew up in the Okanagan Valley and is an associate professor at Thompson River University in Kamloops. She's the author of a poetry and a short story collection, as well as 3 novels. I don't think I lost count. I tried very hard, but I write poetry, so I'm not as good at counting as I could be. Karen writes about rural British Columbia and especially the BC interior. Although this book, the last 2 novels have been very Vancouver novels. Her poems have been shortlisted for the BC book prizes, and she has won the Okanagan Short Fiction Contest 3 times. She writes about place and landscape, and you can see why I paired Karen and Kevin, because it just made such sense to me. But it wasn't just the initials. And she's interested in ways in which individuals and social groups respond and adapt to change. Thanks, Karen.
Okay. It might be helpful when I start to, can you hear me? All right. Yeah, it's good. Okay. To say this book is a sequel to What is Going to Happen Next. So if you haven't read what is going to happen next, maybe a brief synopsis. So the 4 Lund siblings, born in a hippie colony in the Sunshine Coast, and then separated as children and raised in different families. And in What is Going to Happen Next, we see those siblings in their 20s and 30s reunited in Vancouver, and see how they adapt to their lives there and how their lives inform each other. In A Brief View from the Coastal Suite, we pick up with them about 10 years later, 10 years on. So now they're a little bit older and their lives are a little more complicated. So, surprises if they are characters who are people, as they are to me. Right. So I'm going to read a little passage from each of the 3 main characters, so you can see where they are now 10 years later. All right. Mandalay almost has them ready in time. Aiden is dressed at least in his new jeans with the turned up cuffs and a green checked shirt, standing still under her comb when the doorbell sounds. She feels his shoulders square, thinks she can only see the top of his head, that his jaw tightens, her own chest clenches. You're good to go, she says. Can you grab your backpack? Let me see my hair, he says. The mirror's hung on the back of the door. She stands behind him, comb at the ready, his clear skin flushed with the bath, his caramel-colored hair slicked. It's all wrong, he says. How? Look, he says, pointing to the curls forming at his temples where his baby hair, the fine hairline down, has already dried. It's perfect, she says. No. Knocking at the door, peremptory, she yells, coming, and then at the other child, Owen, and hurries to the door. A flitting awareness that she's frowsy, her hair sprouting from the twist put in hours before, her t-shirt sopping from the boy's bath. her sweatpants stained with a misjudged milk pour. The thought that she had meant to have 5 minutes to tidy up sinking through her, stone in a well. She opens the door, and there's Dwayne with his wide shoulders in a new leather jacket half blocking the light. His head is slightly tilted and he's wearing a faint smirk. She knows he's just won a bet made with himself about how long it would take her to come to the door or something like that. Nice jacket, she says. Thanks, he says. Motorcycle. She glances reflexively at the lane, almost believing that he would turn up for the boys on a motorbike, but there's only the hulking black SUV as usual. Then Aiden's at the door beside her, his damp hair, his glowing fine skin. Hey, Dad. Hey, Aiden, how are you? He doesn't touch the boys, she notices again. Aiden looking tense, expectant. How are you, Dad? Well enough, Dwayne says. Then, before a conversation can start, where's your brother? The sound of thumping in the hallway like a one-legged creature approaching, and then a more muffled thud, the tumble of flesh and bone. She sees Dwayne wince, knows that she has winced herself. And Owen appears, hopping in the hallway, more or less dressed, but both of his legs in one half of his jeans. Did you fall? She asks, reaching for him, but he's laughing, showing the gap where all 4 front teeth are missing, the lower permanent ones growing in, serrated, as if he's turning into a shark. Aiden has lost and replaced his teeth one at a time. Owen was late and now losing his milk teeth all at once and scrambling to catch up. Hey, Dad, Owen says enthusiastically. Guess what? Guess what? I guess you haven't learned to put your pants on properly yet, Dwayne says. Get it together, Owen. We're catching a ferry. Oh, right, Owen says, and sits, or rather falls on his bottom and starts over with his jeans. She feels Aiden's shoulder blade like a hard little wing pressing into her waist where he's leaning against her. I'll go get Owen's backpack, Aiden says, and disappears into the hallway. Okay now, Dad? Owen is jiggling with energy. Shirt's on inside out, Dwayne says. Owen laughs, and Dwayne finally laughs with him. Glasses, Owen, Mandalay asks gently as he turns, trips, nearly collides with Aiden in the doorway. Dwayne says, you had one task today, which was to have the boys ready on time. She doesn't answer. She will not argue with him in front of her children. She can hear Owen still rummaging around. Your glasses are in the bathroom, she calls. I know, he calls back. I'm looking for Ed. In your backpack already, she says. Oh, he says, reappearing in the doorway, grinning. I forgot. Who's Ed? Dwayne asks. Teddy bear, she says shortly. Of course he'll say something, make fun of the boys having teddy bears. He just raises an eyebrow at her. She goes to help the boys into the SUV, but Dwayne says, no, they can do it by themselves. They do, opening the heavy doors, climbing into their booster seats, pulling the seatbelts across themselves and fastening them. See you Sunday night, Dwayne says over his shoulder. There's a piece of a broken toy on the walk, the arm and rotator cuff of some scaly plastic creature. Not in Dwayne's way at all, but she sees him nudge smartly off the path with his left foot, not even breaking his stride. All right. So that's our introduction to Mandalay. Surprise, the mother of twins. Okay. So I'm going to move on now and read a little bit from one of Cliff's sections. And maybe what you need to know about Cliff is that his former boss, Mrs. Cookshaw, I think, left him the landscaping business. When she died, she willed him his landscaping business. So Cliff and his brother Ben now own this business. Okay. First, he has to talk to Ben because there he is now getting into his truck, and who knows when Cliff will see him again. He walks up to the vehicle's driver's side window, trying to hurry without seeming to hurry. Ben has started the engine, looks like he's already putting the truck into reverse, but Cliff leans his arm on the open window edge. The truck rides so high, he's not actually able to lean. He stands awkwardly, his arm hooked up on the truck. Ben is high above him, looking down at him. Hey, Ben says. He smiles. He has a wide, easy smile, flash of white, even teeth that has the effect of relaxing any knot, any tightness in people. Cliff fights hard to keep his knot done up. Hey, Ben, he says, got a minute? For you always, big brother, Ben says, but in a way that seems to say he doesn't. Where have you been, he asks. He can hear his own voice grate. It's not how he meant to start. He sees Ben's eyebrows go up. What's this? Ben asks. You keeping tabs on me now? You've been gone a month this time, Cliff says. I'm working 15-hour days, 7 days a week. Ben says, working way too hard, man. I told you that. Hire some new workers. I can't, Cliff says. There's not enough money coming in. So take on some more work. Run the business, Cliff. Don't clip lawn edges. Cliff says, the problem is that you're on payroll. All the time you're gone, you're on payroll. Whoa, whoa, Ben says. I'm finding this really offensive, buddy. We have an agreement. We're partners. I don't think that was the agreement, Cliff says. The wish is a thirst in him like a dog's thirst, that he didn't have to do this. He knows he will lose any argument with Ben. Ben can think on his feet 10 times faster than Cliff. He always ends up losing, not gaining ground when he tries to confront Ben. Stay soft, he tells himself. Stay soft and tell small truths. Where does this come from? I'm not keeping tabs on you, he says. You're just not around. I can't run the business by myself. Shit. He sees too late that was the wrong thing to say. So what you're really trying to say, Ben says, is that you need some more support. We need to hire someone to take on the work you're not capable of. This is how Ben twists things, always. The panic runs in his chest now. Flight response, he says to himself, trying to stay above it, the cold gray maelstrom of it. Stay soft, stay soft. That's exactly it, Ben, he says, surprising himself. Then why attack me, Ben says. Come on, Cliff. You've got to try harder at this partnership thing, man. If you need another manager, we'll put out an ad, or maybe I know a guy. I have someone in mind, Cliff says, but, well, go for it, Ben says, smiling again now, putting the truck in gear. Cliff says, we need to talk, Ben. We need to discuss some things. The fact is, Ben says, I've been working on a really sweet deal for us. Cliff, you're not going to believe it. It's just great. Wait till you see what I've been putting together. Yeah, Cliff says, something bothering him, like Ben has put a piece back on the equipment backward, like that. Something backward, but it all fits, but doesn't really. But he has to believe Ben because it's Ben, his brother, his long-lost little brother, miraculously found. Ben knows him. They're tight, him and Ben. Ben is, well, he's Ben, he says, and means it. I trust you, Ben. He feels his whole body relax into this, feels relief and calm flood through him. The relief of it, the ebbing of all the stress and pissed offness he's been carried around for the last few weeks. It flows through him, it calms his mind, it smooths out the angry shards of thought. Ben reaches out through the truck window, tousles Cliff's hair. Well, it's more of a noogie. A faint ridge on the top of his skull smarts. Ben backs his vehicle up with a jerk so that Cliff has to step back. Stay real, Cliff, Ben says. All right, the horrible Ben. And one last part. And the third sibling, Cleo, who has kind of accidentally landed her dream job and is finding that it's maybe a little bit overwhelming and also maybe comes with some costs that she didn't anticipate. All right. The upper floors of the building are office space, premises for a big brokerage company, a media conglomerate, an advertising consortium, some law firms. About 2/3 of the way up, the outer shell of the building folds inward to make an asymmetrical rounded cleft, or as the builders call it, an infold. It's beautiful and luxurious, a non-essential, expensive use of space and materials. And on the other side of the building, facing the water, there's a daring series of 3 horizontal protrusions, frills, she wants to say, that extend from the side of the building. It's a seashell, she says. The developer is pleased. Got it, he says. Alex touches her shoulder in approval. Alex is her boss. Inside the frills, the building envelope is perforated by high glass walls. The brokerage firm is going to occupy the top third of the building, and the 6-meter high pressed glass space is theirs. They take one of the interior elevators up. The exterior one with a transparent shaft isn't operational yet. And she watches herself in the mirror in her mocha linen trousers, her white silk t-shirt, the carefully cut and highlighted hair that she'll have to crush with her hard hat. Her team, working with Alex, will design the interior space for the brokerage firm, from the concrete walls and huge window inward to the open patio that rests on the topmost frill. She has been walking around in a kind of dream since Monday, when Alex called her in, showed her the first sketches, and said casually, "Want in, Cleo?" They will lean towards minimalist, organic forms to echo the building's seashell shape. The tendency of sound to reverberate in the large space will be mediated with floating layered wall panels that will evoke limestone cliffs or waterfalls. They will be made of recycled glass. Glass panels will isolate individual spaces and can be made opaque by the flick of a switch, which will control an electrical current and minute particles embedded in the glass. Technological advance on Kate's automatic blinds. The lighting will be almost invisible, aluminum orbs painted gray-white, suspended from almost invisible cords. All LED, of course. Everything natural and vertical and designed not to interfere with the view. She knows to walk through the space strategically so that she looks up and sees all at once the immense spread of ocean and sky in front of her. On the protrusion, the balcony outside of the glass wall, there's going to be a park. Trees, benches, grass, a pond. The people who work here will be able to come out and eat their lunches, bring their phones and laptops to work, whatever they want. There will be birds in the trees and fish in the pond. Her team, Tilly, Michael, Pam, and Lindsay, will work on this particularly. They'll be responsible for every detail. In the cab back to the office, Alex smiles at her sideways, his eyes slitted. It's not until the Monday meeting that he gives her the next assignment, though, pulling her aside as the others file out from around the glass boardroom table. "You've got too many draftsmen," he says. "Billing hours aren't cutting it. You need to cut one." "From the project?" "Cut one," he repeats, not even impatiently, just a little absently. "We don't need that many in the pool." "Which one? Tilly?" "One of the veterans," he says. "Pam or Lindsay? Your decision."
Thanks so much, Karen. You mentioned twins.
Yes.
As a Gemini with ADHD, I'm sure my mother felt like she had twins. But like, you evoke the chaos. My next door neighbor back next to my mom has triplets, 3 boys. And yeah, chaos can reign when the kids outnumber the parent one at a time. If one person's at work, or when both are at home, they're outnumbering. It's terrifying. But like, are twins part of your life? Have you been around a lot of twins?
I have twin cousins, twin aunts, I was going to say twin grandparents. That sounds weird. Twin grandparents. Yeah. But I do not have twins, but I did have at, that stage of my life. And I have to be careful what I say here because I think those people are listening, but I did have many small children that, on the ground at one time. Yes.
Yeah. I don't have twins. I just have very hyper siblings, not siblings, like relatives around the same age. So it was, yeah, they can get like close siblings, or it can feel similar. Yeah, I just, as a Gemini, I appreciated it. Thanks for reading. We have the chat box up for questions. We already have one question in, but while other people add some more questions, I'm going to ask one for all the readers. Which one? I prepped some stuff. Let's go with, I mentioned earlier the Noon Attack First Fiction series. I misstated it, but the Noon Attack First Fiction series is the longest running debut fiction series set in Canada. Kind of got me, and like, Karen, your first novel with us was part of this series, and the 2 authors' books are part of that series now. It got me thinking about how you all started writing fiction, or came to writing in general, and how did you end up with New West Press?
Are you asking all of us, Claire?
All of you. And you spoke first, so you get to go.
What was the question again?
It's about how did you come to writing, or writing fiction or short fiction specifically for you, and how did you come to New West Press?
I started writing fiction because I thought that's where all the money was, and I'm just kidding. They can't get your can't get your response. I started writing when my firstborn was a baby, and he was a really good napper, and I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And so I sat down with like Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, and I just started doing writing practice. And some of those things turned into kind of poems. And yeah, I sent some of them off, and some of them got published. And then I wanted to figure out how to write a story. And the first story I wrote was like, it all came out in one kind of sitting, which was like, then I thought that's how it went, but I learned very quickly that's not how it goes. So yeah, it's a bit more of an apprenticeship from that place on. And going through the MFA program and learning how, like, the craft of story was really helpful for me. And I love short stories. I really love short stories. I love writing them, and I love reading them. And I came to New West because my manuscript was done. I needed a publisher, and I really liked I like that New West focuses on Western Canadian writers. I liked some of the books that New West had put out that I had read. Yeah, just to and so I sent, and you guys accept a full manuscript. Like, some other publishers don't accept full manuscripts, and when you're writing a collection of short stories, it's hard to, like, I don't know, give a sense of the book if you can't even, like, give a full story, you know? So I really appreciated that the whole thing could be received and read and considered. Yeah, I'll let you go, Karen.
Okay, I'll go. So I think I started writing when I learned how to make enough letters that I could write words. I have a story I wrote when I was 7. There's pirates in it, so and that I think is my first piece of finished fiction. But I didn't start to publish poetry and fiction until I was in my 30s, I think. So a long apprenticeship. And like Tracy, one of the short stories I finished and knew was done in my 30s and sent it off to Chatelaine, and they published it. So it was crazy. I thought, okay, this was easy, right? And it wasn't, was it? And New West, as Tracy mentioned too, New West has this wonderful habit of reading or accepting entire manuscripts. And my first book that I sent them after Alice just takes a while to get going. I think it's a little leisurely. It takes a while to, get into the story and get the characters. And I had sent it to a couple of places who would only read the first few pages, and they said, oh, it has to grab us. We have to get the whole thing in the first few pages. And I thought, well, that's just not working for me, right? You just need to give this a little more time. So that was a big find when a friend said, oh, you should try New West, and then I discovered this and have had a long, happy relationship, I think. Happy for me anyway, with New West. Yeah. And I guess it's Kevin's turn.
We're very happy. Kevin?
So can you repeat the first question again?
Basically, how did you come to writing, and how did you come to publishing, and how did you come to publishing with New West Press?
Oh, yeah. I think I never set out to be a writer, I think, when I was young. I think I just read Catcher in the Rye when I was 16, and then I went for a long walk through the alleys, and I felt really hurt by the book, like wounded by it. And then because of that wound, something else could come in. And I thought, hey, I want to do that someday. And I started writing this book when I was 20, and I never thought it would get published, and I don't think I wrote it with the intention of having it published. That just came a bit later when I started editing it. And New West Press, to be honest, I love New West Press, and I love all of you, but I don't know a lot about New West Press. I submitted because I lived in Strathcona, and on my way to campus, I would walk by the office all the time and see the sign.
Up in the window.
Yeah. I was like, I'm gonna get my book up there. So that's why.
Above the upper crust.
Yeah. Looked good.
Yeah, that's like I have a poetry book, and my first publishing was because I knew someone. Like it was like I didn't set out.
Yeah.
And I'm a big defender of Catcher in the Rye. It's a book about trauma.
Yeah, I think so too.
We have a whole bunch of questions. I appreciate every audience member right now, but coming out with questions makes my job a lot easier, so I really appreciate the questions. I'm going to start at the top with Thea Bowering. So it's a question for Kevin. Kevin, all your characters are outsiders in different, hilarious, tragic, etc. ways. The Book of Ruth can also be read as a story about an outsider. I'm wondering if you can talk about the various ways these family members are outsider artists and what attracted you to this kind of character.
I think I'm not attracted to anything else. That's why. What was the first part of your question? Sorry, Thea.
Basically, could you talk about the various ways the family members are outsider artists?
Oh, yeah. Well, this has been an interesting response. I've had a few people read the book and get back to me and ask me like, oh, your characters are all great artists and like this kind of thing. But I don't think they're great artists. I think they're terrible, and that's what makes them so beautiful. I don't think that answered the question at all.
No, but I've been to many a poetry open mic where I can appreciate that people are just creating. You know what I mean? Like, I could fill my time doing awful things. And even when I'm writing a bad poem, like I'm not consuming while writing. That's the one reason I can say like, I'm not, like today I spent an hour looking for a baseball hat. Are You Afraid of the Dark? I ordered an Are You Afraid of the Dark baseball hat. But there is a good and just, even if it's not great art in creating in general. So I totally get that. Next question.
You're muted, Claire.
I got excited and muted myself. I'm not going to go in order of the questions, so don't worry, I have them copied and pasted. It's just I like to mix them up. Karen, now that you live in Victoria, do you find the city has a very different personality than Vancouver? And if so, how so? And that's from Anne.
Yeah, it does have a different personality from Vancouver. It's smaller, it's slower, it's more, I think it's more into alternative ways of being, creative ways of being. It's a little bit more, I'd say it's a little bit more, what's the word? Green, hayseed, lefty. It's all those things. It's, you know, it's gentler. It's a little bit like that. Yeah. But I love Vancouver. I love the energy of Vancouver. I love being in Vancouver. I love just the size and the variety of it.
I've spent about the same time in Vancouver as I spent 4 days in Vancouver, and I've spent about 5 days, but I've been to more trips to Victoria. Like I spent 18 hours in Victoria once, which was like a real roundabout trip. And what I found that, yeah, they're very different, but they're also very expensive. That's one thing, like, because economics plays a big part
in the book. Yeah.
So I find it interesting that you moved from one, I guess in BC that just happens, one sort of hot spot where it's expensive to live to another hot spot when it's expensive to live. Shouldn't say hot spot right now, but yeah, it's interesting. Next question. This is for everyone. So you guys have to argue, like arm wrestle to go first, which authors never do. They always avoid going first. Caroline asks, what is your favorite underappreciated book or author, and who do you go to for inspiration?
Everyone looking around.
If you want to think on that one, we can go to a different question for now.
I'll jump in for that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I like to read. I've read all the books of I got to try to say Karl Ove Knausgård. I can't say it. I'm sure I've just butchered it. Yes,
and you have to say all with him because those are big.
Yes, which I find them an inspiration and fresh and different, and just really like them. I like his insistence on detail. Yeah, and shame. He's big on shame. That's a good thing to read about. So now I've given everyone a breather, so everyone else can have it.
If it's an easier question for now to lead into it, what's the last book you read that blew your mind? That's sometimes an easier way to like hop into talking about books and how it inspired you, sort of thing. I don't know if it's easier.
Blew my mind.
It's when I hand sell books when I actually got to see people in person. That's the question. Like, what movie, what creative thing that you participated with blew your mind? And like that always helped me decide which books to try to sell.
I don't know about blew my mind, but I really loved Normal People by Sally Rooney. That was a fairly recent read, and then watched the show as well, and loved that. Like carried it around with me for days after or weeks after, and told everybody to read it.
What about it drew you in?
I'm really interested in ways writers use form, and I like how she used time in it, that she would sort of preface the chapter with almost like the aftermath of the event that she was then going to tell you in the chapter, right? It's just sort of I like that, and I like the sharpness of the prose and the dialogue, and and the Irish.
I loved that book. I also am drawn to real Irish stuff just because my people. Kevin?
I'd say just in terms of books that made an impact on me formally, the novels of Michael Ondaatje, it was a big one, because I really appreciated the way that he let the sentences just kind of do their own thing, releasing a bit of control of what is possible within the sentence. Elizabeth Strout was another one, about her writings about family dynamics and things unsaid. And also Sheila Watson, a bit older, wrote The Double Hook.
You just did The Double Hook for my book club, and I read that, and I read it in undergrad. So good.
I love it. I want to reread it. Yeah. Do you have a copy?
I do.
Oh, cool. I'm not gonna ask to borrow it or anything.
No, you can borrow it. We already I'm not gonna read it immediately again. I just read it. So yeah, I can lend it to you, but you have to be good for it.
Okay.
And what about Sheila Watson pulled you in?
I think there was just like a mythical, magical. Oh, is it there? Oh yeah, Thea has it. Yeah, I just felt there was like a mythical sort of simmering underbelly to the whole thing. As though she could have written a 1,000-page novel, but she chose to write one that was under 200 pages, I think.
Yeah, and for me, I'm like, coming from the poetry world, I'm like, this is a poem.
Yeah, exactly.
I get this. This is for my people. I'm gonna say my people again. Right now, my people are baseball people, so I don't know what else to say to you guys. Next question. Thomas Wharton asks, Kevin, you're a youngster. How did you imagine your way into the 1970s?
How did you imagine your way into the 19th century? It was probably something like that. I think I've always just been fascinated with it because of music and culture, and I grew up listening to a lot of 60s, 70s bands, so that was just the first place my mind went. And I think I didn't want to deal with the internet either. I didn't want there to be a novel where the internet existed. Yeah.
That's tricky. That's why there's all these 90s books right now, is because people don't want cell phones, because cell phones are plot killers. Especially in horror and stuff like that. That's why people are like, why is everyone doing the 80s again? I'm like, because an evil clown shows up now, you call someone. Like, 1970s to me, though, is very important right now. I feel like I was obsessed with like sort of 100 years ago, like World War I, 1918 with the pandemic, but like the 70s, I feel like we are doing the 70s again. Not as much polyester, but a lot of like secret groups getting together to try and undermine the system for good and bad. Yeah, I feel it. So it makes sense to me that you hopped into that universe. 70s is a universe now. Kate Wells asks, Karen, is Mandalay a shout out to Daphne du Maurier? We also did this book in my book club.
Well, I guess the name, right? But I was just looking for names for the characters. I think that were a little bit unusual and unexpected, and yeah, I think it came more from On the Road to Mandalay, the song.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good for you, Katie, for picking up the Daphne du Maurier reference. Yeah,
it does feel like
I like Daphne du Maurier. Yeah, Daphne du Maurier's books. I do.
I recently
lots different from mine.
So good. No, the thing you both have in common. I don't make pictures in my head when I read. It's just a learning disability thing. It's cool. I read emotionally. So most descriptions of landscapes bore the socks off of me because they exist to make pictures in the head of the reader. And if you can't do that, so I have to read those emotionally. And all three of you write landscapes and evoke them with the emotions of the character in the text. So it's not like if I read Tolkien, for example, there's chunks of Tolkien where I'm like, okay, I got it, Hobbit hole. Like, but you guys, I'm able to engage with all your work because of that. So there is a strange connection. Same with Daphne du Maurier. Like, the Gothic is all about evoking emotions and landscapes. But yeah, I love that book too. So next question. Anne asks, Kevin, do you paint portraits or landscapes? Your description of paint colors and technique is very evocative.
I actually don't. I think this is how I'm compensating. That's all. I've always wanted to. My brother is a painter. I think he's here. Maybe
thanks for giving us a really great cover if you're here.
Yeah, totally. He is here, I think. But yeah, I've always wanted to be able to paint.
I'm similar. I'm a non-painter. My best friend in high school was really great at art and painting. And so I was like, I'll do the words. We tried to do a comic book together. I'm like, I'll do the words in the story. You do the art. And so I books about artists. One of my prepped questions was about all the art in your guys' novels, and various different. Cliff is an artist of landscaping. Cleo is artistic, but she's sort of subsumed that into the business world. Mandalay is an artist. And all your characters, like all the three main people are artists. Like, so again, it wasn't just the initials of why I paired you guys up. Paul Milross asks, what is your favorite genre and form to write in for all of you? And do you think I'm adding on to this, do you think there's a reason why you're drawn to that? I write poems because I have ADHD. It's quick in and quick out. But yeah, do you guys have, I know Karen, this is a weird question for you because you have so many varieties, but yeah.
I think that I wrote in poetry for a while because it was something I could do in very short bursts of time. And then when I got more time, I did more fiction, I think. Hi, Paul. I'm going to say hi to Paul, who asked the question. Hi, Paul in England, where it's 3 o'clock in the morning, or maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. Wow.
The champion, Paul.
Paul is a writer too. Paul is doing an MFA. Yes, a shout out to Paul. I'll turn it over to Kevin and Tracy.
Yeah, I write short fiction, but also essays, short form essays. I think I'm gonna have to trick myself into writing a novel if that ever happens, like the way George Saunders, you know, he had to trick himself into writing Lincoln in the Bardo. And like, I'm looking for novels, and I'm looking at novels that are kind of like short stories but turned novel, because like I'm reading too many things right now, but one of the books I'm reading is The Overstory, and there's like a number of characters introduced at the beginning. I'm like, okay, that's kind of like short stories all together. So I do love the short story form, though. I don't think that the short story is just a condensed novel. I think in its own right, it is a beautiful form with a deep resonance to it. And that's what I love about it. I love puzzling it out and finding that resonance in it, in the story, and bringing it to the surface.
Well, they are so tricky because the hardest things, at least for me, beginnings and endings, and they're so close together. Like you have to yeah. I've only ever published. I've written like 4 short stories ever, and I've only published 1, which is a pretty good. If it was baseball, excellent batting average, but it's not baseball. Yeah, I find them very challenging. So like. And I've been trying to trick myself into writing a novel for 2 years. So I totally get what you're saying. Kevin?
Yeah, like you, I mostly write poetry. This is the only time I've tried anything else.
Well, it went very well, I have to say.
Thanks.
And
yeah.
You didn't write a small novel. Like it is.
Yeah. Go hard or go home, right?
Yeah, a little publishing trick is if it's over a certain size, it costs double the ship. So like yours was one of the 2 most challenging books to get it into the right size for shipping, which it's a fun, like those are fun problems. Like, oh, there's too much of this great book. Yeah, go.
Sorry, we're short on time.
No.
Okay. No, I think I was going to say that the poetry, especially stuff that is very invested in language and what it looks like and how it feels to hold it and play with it, is especially powerful. Like Lisa Robertson, who someone was mentioned in the comments, I think. I found that very informative, and I think it's a mindset that is easily transferable to prose, I found.
Yeah, when I took fiction in my master's, our professor was very much of the school of every sentence should do something. Like in prose, like in novels and short stories, and like there's this is an idea that poetry is where the language lives, but all those skills are transferable back and forth to a certain extent. It's different forms of obsession, I guess. Like, yeah. So Elizabeth McLaughlin, Kevin, you're gonna stay up for a second. Elizabeth McLaughlin asks, my friends and I are wondering, what your MA thesis is about, or your latest project, if you want to talk about that one instead.
I want to have friends who sit around talking about MA theses. It was about, it focused on notions of collectivity and community, especially in relation to land-based research. So it was, it was a complex weaving of reflections on Indigenous settler relations in Edmonton, as well as different kind of philosophical trends looking at what it means to have connections between humans and non-human animals and things.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
my MA thesis was poems about walking around Fredericton. See, I didn't get a grant because you can't get a grant for being like, I want to walk around Fredericton.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And then I ran into Walter Benjamin and he took me to someplace completely different.
So last question, and it's for Karen. Karen, this is a sequel. How different did it feel writing about characters you've already spent time with versus writing a novel with new characters?
Oh, interesting. Well, I didn't want to write a sequel. I'll just say that to start, but the characters made me. They kept telling me stuff, so I had to write more stuff about them. So I guess in some ways the characters are already developed. You know a lot about them. You know what they do in certain circumstances or what they might do, which can be, that can make it easier, but also it can be a restriction too. I suppose you have to ask, would this character do this? Where could this character go if these circumstances, happen? And there's always the first book in the back, right, in the background. So where is the arc of this book going from the arc of the last one, and does that make any sense too? Right? So not just plot wise, but structurally, thematically, and so on. Yeah.
I feel like your two books work like Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained in a weird way. And I just mean like Paradise Lost, you get a narrative about Satan that doesn't quite make sense until you read Paradise Regained and you see the sort of cheapening of Satan becoming this cartoony Satan. And that's the sort of arc he's on through both stories. And I think like your characters are on arcs through both stories that make sense. So you did a good job. That's what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. I want you to write me a blurb that compares me to Milton so that I can use that.
I don't know if you're going to publish with us, if the marketing person can write a blurb for you, but I'll do it. I don't mind breaking. Like Satan, I don't mind transgressing boundaries.
Yeah. That's more a thing of our time. No, I guess you can't write blurbs for me, can you? So, okay.
I may get you to write one for me, but okay. I just want to thank you all for being here, and to the authors for reading, and for all your great questions. Okay. There's a message from you, for you, Tracy, from Thea. We have 2 more events coming up this month. On May 10th, we have another double launch, this time of 2 historical novels. And as I said, I've been a bit obsessed with World War I. These novels played into that because both have connections to World War I. And that's by Daniel Neal and the Gigi Award winning author in kids books, Glenn Huser. On May 17th, Edmonton Poet Laureate Nisha Patel will launch her debut collection with guest reader, multiple award nominated Bertrand Bickerstaff. And you can find those on our Facebook page. They're on Eventbrite as well if you try searching. It's hard when your name's New West Press, but like I swear they're there. Or you can find them on our website under our events page. Yeah, our website is newwestpress.com. There's 1 W in that. There's links and everything there. So you'll be all set. How you got here is the same way you'll get there, basically. And thanks again, everyone. And as I always say at the end of events, remember, if you can, please continue to support small publishers and bookstores of any size. We wouldn't be here without you all. And you'll see Alex has put the link to Bastion Books down at the bottom. They're our official bookseller for the night. Support them. It's great to support bookstores. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey,
Claire.
thank you.